let's go through the perfect world settings in Palworld. Before we get started, I just want to say, of course, we're about to see a lot of my opinions. This is aimed at generalist play. Obviously, if you want to make things more hardcore for yourself, you should change things accordingly. But I've played this with friends and family. I've actually had 2 groups of people on my worlds with me, and we've gone through quite a lot of the different stuff. Had a good feeling as to whether or not the game feels fair for the most part. Let's go through each of the settings and we will talk about what they do and my recommendation for them. And also why you might change the settings during certain stages of the game, whether that's early game or late game, depending on what it is that you're going to do. To start with, that brings us to daytime and nighttime speed. This is pretty much self-explanatory. If you speed this up, this is going to shorten the night. If you speed this up, it's going to shorten the day. If you feel like there's too much nighttime, you could speed this up a little bit, and that's just going to allow you to have more daylight as you're playing. An important thing to note about these, especially for later on in the game, dungeons will reset on an in-game day basis. So if you're trying to farm something, speeding these up can speed up the rate at which you're able to farm certain things in the game. In general, I prefer to have more day than night, but I do like to have a decent night. So I speed night up by a very small amount, and I think that's worth it. I think it feels good. It still feels like you're getting most of the night. You still got plenty of time to go out and get the pals that appear at nighttime. It means that you don't feel like you're spending so much of the game in the dark. Autosave interval. This is your failsafe. If you get a bug, and there are some bugs that can soft lock you or become permanent bugs in the game, it's a good idea to have an autosave so that you can reload it. And so having really fast autosaves is bad in case you don't catch it. I like every 10 minutes. I think that's about right. So if something goes wrong, you're only going to lose 10 minutes of progress at most. And that's if you're like really unlucky because it goes down on the 9th minute. So I think 10 minutes is good. Some people will say 5, but I think 10 minutes is good. This is actually an issue that I just haven't had in game, but I do know that it is an issue. So that's what that's for. There's not really too much to recommend or any reason to change it from that. I just like 10 minutes. Experience rate. I like to leave this as it is. There are some cases where you might fiddle with this. If you feel like you want to fully explore things without over leveling an area, you might turn this down, because the fastest way to level in the game is to catch 12 of each pal, because you get a huge experience bonus, and that experience bonus scales with your level. Whenever you get into a new area, you catch all of the new pals, and that's going to level you up pretty fast, and you can outlevel the area. But it really isn't a problem because the game's gear-based and you have to get to the new materials anyway. So you could even have this be slightly higher and it really doesn't hurt anything. The main thing this is actually going to help you with is leveling up new pals, and so there might be an argument for having this up at something like 1.5x, just so that if you catch a pal that's a bit lower level than you, it catches up with you a little bit quicker. But ultimately, I haven't found that to be an issue. The main time you might tamper with this is later on in the game, or if someone else joins your game. For example, if you're right at the end of the game and you hatch a brand new pal, it's level 1, and you want it to hurry up and get to level 60, this is how you're going to make that faster. If you want to go ahead and grind all those levels the slow way, you could leave it at 1x, or you could cackle to yourself as you 10x the experience. Once you've already reached the level cap with your own character, this really isn't even going to affect your character. And as you might imagine, if you have a new person come and play with you and they start at level 1 and have nothing, this means that they don't have to faff around so much. You can just burst them up with a load of XP, and now they can create stuff, build things with you, and get on with the adventures. Realistically, that's what I think the experience rate is probably best for. Pal capture rate, I actually like to turn this up slightly, and that's mostly because we're going to get on to pal appearance rate in a second more specifically, but I like to have my pal appearance rate a little bit higher. And so because there's going to be so many pals, you're going to burn through so many pal spheres and so many resources, and a lot of the time I'm playing with 2 kids and my wife, and we like to, you know, go out, do all of the other stuff, and I've got to get all the resources for these extra pal spheres. Having it be a bit higher, but not so high that every catch is an auto catch, I think overall makes the game feel a bit better for me. If you're happy with just 1.0, keep it at 1.0. I wouldn't put it all the way up to the top unless you're trying to burn through the game for some reason, but ultimately 1.2 feels the best. 1.5 felt too high, so I think 1.2, maybe like edging to 1.3 if you have extra young people playing with you, but 1.2 I think feels really, really good. On the pal appearance rate then, so obviously this is a multiplier to pals, and for your everyday normal pals, 1.9 is going to make it so that the game feels more populated. Now, we don't really want to step over that. The reason for this is because once you get to 2.0, this will actually multiply boss boss pals. Unless you're going to like really fiddle with making those boss pals easier, that's going to be really tough. Unless you're specifically farming stuff, and maybe if you've got like a really good group, high level group that wants to farm them that fast, maybe that can be good. But ultimately, I think for general play, especially like just starting out, you're just playing the brand new game. 1.9 makes the game feel really, really populated. We're going to have good capture rates, so you're just going to have great time catching all these pals that are all over the place, but the bosses aren't going to get multiplied on you, which I think is really good. I like upping the damage from pals multiplier to 0.4. 0.5 might be doable, but once you start getting higher, we're going to start having to mess around with the damage to player multiplier, mostly because otherwise you're going to get one shot by some of the tougher enemies. We've got predators and like all sorts of other stuff that are going to spawn in the game, and they're going to give you like these surprise encounters. But I like my encounters to feel dangerous and fairly quick. Like I want it to be like a really nice spike of action. I don't want to be fighting with a damage sponge, but I also don't want it to be easy. So I'm going to tie these two together for right now, but I like to have damage from the player and damage from pals high. Don't like messing with damage to pals. You might even turn this up slightly, but if you do that, you're going to want to turn your own damage up. The reason for this is because none of these damage sliders affect human NPCs in the game. So if you wanted to do this a different way, like you want to go 1.2, 1.2 to make that kind of more even, so that the battles between pals on the surface here would look more dangerous to each other. So if I put my pal out, the opposing pal is also going to do more damage. It's going to be really lethal. The biggest problem with this is the human NPCs are not affected by any of these sliders, which means the human NPCs aren't taking additional damage, but are doing additional damage to pals. I prefer to do it in such a way where damage to pals stays at 1, damage from pals goes up to 0.4. This just helps the encounters feel pretty fresh. Like the boss encounters will feel pretty dangerous because when they hit you, it's going to feel pretty bad. Like if you're against a boss pal and it directly hits you with a strong move, it's probably going to drain your entire shield in one shot, and then you really need to be careful about managing your health and stuff. And I quite like that. My kids like it. They find it quite exciting. My little girl, sometimes she gets a bit, oh my god, it's hurting me so much. But that's really cool because then me and my lad, we come in and we save the day, you know. It's really cool. I think it makes for really good dynamic gameplay. Maybe if you're solo, you can change this around in a different way, but just in our experience and how we play, this feels quite good. We like to put the pal hunger depletion and the stamina reduction rate all the way down. Even down this much, you're still going to be feeding your pals every in-game day easily. You'll be feeding all of your pals, and the main reason to put the stamina reduction down is once you are flying or riding pals, it's really annoying that you're just like kind of flying across and then suddenly you gotta drop all the way down to the floor, wait a minute for your stamina to regenerate, and then fly again. I don't think that helps gameplay. I don't think it does anything for the gameplay at all. This doesn't affect them working. This doesn't affect them in combat, really. All it does is slows you down. I think pal stamina reduction rate, just put it to the bottom. You can disagree, you can put yours wherever you want to, but I just think having it down there just makes the game feel a lot better. When it comes to pal health regen, then we should have the whilst in the pal box at max. There's no reason for them to stay out of the fight for too long. When it comes to the auto health regen rate, then this is during combat, and I think maxed is probably too high. A good medium point is going to be something like 3 or 4. Unlike the player, a pal is not going to be taking cover, so it is going to be taking constant damage. Having this a little bit higher isn't really going to make too big of a difference. This is going to affect the player far more than it affects your pals. But having this lower so that pals take more damage will encourage you to change pals more often. So having this at something like 3 may be interesting to you. If you like clunky gameplay, you could turn that all the way down if you want and make it so the health regen's slower, but this is something that I like personally. We've already spoken about damage from player multiplier. You might actually take this up slightly 1 just so that we have a small advantage over the pals. The reason for that is because the player has such a low damage multiplier that this actually really isn't going to affect much. You could double this and it's going to be so tiny, like you start with 100 attack damage, which barely even does anything to your weapons, whereas the pals are doing absolutely ridiculous amounts of damage. Realistically speaking, you could put this wherever you want, but I reckon 0.5, just so we've got a slight extra multiplier on there, because we are going to be taking a lot of damage, so we need to make sure these encounters are at least doable, because, you know, it's not like we get loads of iframes to avoid damage or anything, so you are going to have to take some hits. This brings us to damage to player as well. I actually like to have this at 0.8 because then we have pals that are lethal to each other. We can damage the pals, but we're not going to do that much of the damage. We're also not going to take that much damage. The cool thing is, with these settings, you could become a little bit like a Pokemon trainer, because you could do something like take not too much damage, not do too much damage, then have the pals themselves do the damage, which is a cool idea for a concept. My lad actually liked this idea. Maybe we'll do like a randomized world, which we'll talk about in a minute, where you play as like a Pokemon trainer and you don't do the damage yourself. You have to catch the pal, then train the pal, then have the pals boss fight. That's a completely different concept. For now, though, just to make sure you're not going to get one shot by something like a predator, 0.8 is good. I should have a clip. I'll try and get it up. I got hit by a predator and it took like a third of my health down with this setting on, right? You don't want to go down in 2 shots. And that was an even leveled with basic gear. So like it was fairly fair in my opinion of a fight. And so that's why I'm going to use the clip. So 0.8, it's about right. Maybe 0.7 with these damage settings, right? And you have to remember, if you like use different damage settings on here, you're going to want different stuff down here. So whatever you decide to change is up to you. But having it like this specifically feels pretty good in my opinion. Player hunger depletion, we turn that down to half. That way we're not constantly having to eat berries all of the time, which is ultimately what I always end up using because they're light and easy to farm. And stamina reduction rate we put to 0.8. At 1 feels really annoying when you're trying to climb. You can't get up to a ledge and like loads of other stuff. Also, when you're mining or when you're doing like trees, it just means you're resting more often. There could even be a case to turn this even further down, but 0.8 felt pretty good. Just the extra 20% natural stamina just seems to make it feel a bit better for getting around in the world. I think, yeah, just turning that down very slightly is just going to, in general, make everything feel smoother. When it comes to the player health regen rate, then I think 4 is probably the best place to go. The thing with this is it's going to depend entirely on how well you play and how much damage you feel like you're taking, because what this is going to allow you to do is, whilst you're in combat, is regenerate health. Now this is going to be at a reduced rate than outside of combat, and if you're taking lots of damage, it's not really going to help you. Whilst you're taking damage, you're not going to be regenerating that health. It effectively allows you to use your health like shield, so you can get behind some cover, allow your health to regenerate, and then get back in the fight. So the more easily you want to be able to do that, the higher that you may put this particular setting. I would probably have this pretty low if the bosses weren't able to clip their moves through things like pillars and stuff when you're in the boss fights. It should probably be between 3 and 4. Having it at max can make you feel a little bit immortal, especially against lower level enemies, but against some of the harder enemies that are going to tank loads of your health off, I really don't think you want to have this too low. Otherwise you're just going to end up dying a lot, and then you're going to have to be restarting and recollecting your gear and stuff, and I think that's going to be annoying for most people. Damage to structure multiplier. Once we get a little bit further into this video, you're going to see that this is really probably something that you're not going to want to toy with until you're later on in the game. For that reason, we're turning it all the way down, and it's going to be something you need to get a feel for, because the only way your structures get attacked is when you get raided, and late game raids are a specific way to farm certain enemies and bosses, and by the time that's the case, you're probably going to want to have a specific base for getting raided. So we just don't really care about this. I think this has actually been patched. I tried Googling some stuff with this, but apparently, like, basically, if you place an item down in the world, it doesn't really deteriorate anyway. I like to send this down to 0. It just means if you place something near your base or whatever, because sometimes you'll want to like overlap out of your base, it's not going to take damage over time or anything like this. So just turn that off. It's not really an issue unless you're like on a server with loads of players. So deterioration rate, we have that down, and damage structures multiplier is also down. This basically also defends against burning your whole entire base down if you accidentally set it on fire. You know, when you got kids playing, they do silly things, right? Maximum number of dropped items in a world. This is actually kind of important, and I can't tell if it has a bad effect on the game or not. We have ours all the way up to 4,000. So there are a few things to consider with this. This is basically all of the loot that you see as you're going around the world. When you consider that you might have 10 bases and a lot of pals, and they drop all that loot on the ground, as you're going around, you're also farming pals, and they drop loot on the ground. And I can't seem to confirm it in any way, but apparently this also affects the loot that you see spawning. So as you're going around the world and you see things like the chests and all the loot on the ground, that is also going to be affected by this. So just having that extra headroom, I think, is pretty good. The game deletes from the back anyway, so item that has been spawned for the longest gets deleted first. But having the extra headroom does feel really good. There's no real way to quantify it, I guess, but between me and another friend that's, again, been on the same world with this, we found that going from 3,000 to 4,000... with all of our bases and stuff on us, we're going all around, it just felt like there was more loot around. Can't really put that into numbers. Ultimately, I think it's a good idea to turn this up. This hasn't really affected the performance on our world very much, and we've had 4 players going off in all sorts of different directions, building bases and all sorts of other stuff, and this has just not really been a problem. Now we're into gatherable items. So gatherable items multiplier, basically this is each time you hit a tree or some ore with a pickaxe, for example, you'll get more items. Put it up to the top. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't do this. Unless, for some reason, you want to be stood there hitting a piece of ore for longer and getting less resources, I don't see why you wouldn't turn this up to the top. Because gathering items is done per hit, gatherable objects health multiplier makes the item last longer. You might just immediately go, okay, so that means if I do this, this is effectively turning one node into 6 because you're getting 3 times per hit and it's lasting 3 times longer. This is fantastic for opening up more base locations without having to just having one that's on top of a load of ore nodes, or once on top of a load of oil nodes, or once on top of a load of coal nodes. Because now you've turned one coal node, for example, or sulfur node, whatever it is, you've turned it into 6 basically in terms of value, which is very good. When you're trying to mine that as a player, you are getting more resources, but you're stood there for a lot longer. You might change this depending on the phase of the game that you're in. For example, we found that at 1.5, it felt a lot better to mine manually. So at the very early stages of the game, when you're doing a lot of things yourself and you get things set up, this might be the better way. Even though that is actually going to be less resources per node, that is going to make it so that, you know, you actually get finished with a stone, or you get finished mining through some ore and you can go and do something else rather than being stood there for so long. And then once you have your actual base in the place that you want, and maybe it just has one ore node, well, now we go like this, and that single ore node is going to last longer. So your mining pal that you're going to use is going to be able to just use that single node. And I know someone's going to talk about you can use an actual manually placed ore node now, but until you get that unlocked, I feel like this is a fair thing to be a consideration. Once you get to the point where you can just have all of your own stuff in a base, obviously this almost becomes irrelevant. This is more of an early game consideration, or when you start getting into oil, or when you start getting into the new Terraria realm thing. But for general play, like just starting out, I think 1.5 feels good. The moment you start getting into the idea of, I feel like there's not many good places for bases because I need to have loads of ore in my base and that's messing the way that my base looks up. Well, when you do this now, if you can just find a spot with 2 ore in it, well, that counts as 12, and you now don't have to plan your entire base around being full of ore nodes. And I think that's fantastic. My wife thinks that's fantastic. So far, everybody thinks it's better to do this that I've played with. Gatherable objects respawn interval. That one there is an in-game day. I like to turn this down because now we've turned that single ore node into 2. And this basically means you can have one. All you need now in any base is one node and you are sorted. I obviously haven't played this in any kind of competitive online way. And I don't know if this game's going to go the way of Ark, where people start getting vicious over stuff. I think this should be the standard if that is the case, because surely we want more viable base locations and not less. And this makes any node a viable base location. And I think that's good. Dropped items multiplier. Same as gatherable items multiplier, except for dropped items from pals. Should always be at the top. You need so much resources, it's crazy. Especially if there are a group of you. So that's pal fluids, bones, horns, all of the other stuff when it comes to like making medicine to keep your pals working properly. This should just put it straight to the top. There's no reason for that to not be at the top. Item weight should be at the bottom. This is pretty self-explanatory. This stops items from weighing stuff. I actually think the game wants you to do this now. There is a new item in the game which allows you to add more slots to your character. And I don't see how you'd be using more slots if you don't have more weight. So I think having inventory progression be based on expanding your slots with pouches rather than using your leveling up on carry capacity feels a hell of a lot better to me. Equipment durability loss multiplier. This is entirely up to each person, but I personally have this all the way down to 0. Since playing Grounded 2 and seeing how that handles gathering tools, I'm all for I build my tool and it's done. Especially like when you think about the special weaponry and stuff that you get in this game that can be a pain in the ass to farm. I think actually just not having them break or having to go back to base to repair it all, that is an ache that I don't need to have. If you enjoy that, you can have that on, but we're talking about just like a nice feeling, smooth journey through the game. Most people, when I put this on, don't even notice that it's on. They're expected to go repair stuff, but they never ask, like, oh, Joe, have you turned it off? They just, get on with the game and they love it. I think this is the new way for survival games. I think a lot of games are probably going to copy this because I think after playing it that way on Grounded 2, it just feels way better to have that so low. Previously, I would have had that a bit higher, but no, I think turn it off. It just feels way better. There's not even competition. Meteorite supply drop intervals. These are random loot that gets dropped onto the map, and I think we have this low. That 180 there is 180 minutes. I'm not entirely sure if that's in-game minutes or real minutes. Ultimately, we want that to be far lower than every 3 hours. And for us, every 30 minutes felt pretty good. Every hour is probably arguable because these drop really good stuff. You get rare recipes and materials and pals and stuff dropping in with these. I could see an argument for higher, and if you were trying to farm them, you would obviously put it lower, but just for the feel-good factor of going through the game, 30 minutes to me felt about right. Time in hours to incubate a massive egg is going to 0. A large proportion is going to be breeding pals. The idea that we would set up a breeding base and then have to wait 2 hours for each egg, unreasonable. So we're just not going to do it. Instead, you get your eggs, you put them in the incubator, and they're done. We like that. Raid events. Starting out, I would actually turn these off. We're talking about smoothness going through the game. That's what we want, right? We want to be going through the game, and we want to enjoy ourselves going through the game. You know what's really annoying? I'm in the middle of a dungeon, and now my base is under attack. By the time I get out of the dungeon, my base is on fire. Now, I know we have the ability to put the damage multiplier to the base down, but getting out and then half your pals have been fainted, you've got to put them all away. And that's if you're not on hardcore, they could all be dead. And then you've got to find new pals until they've all healed themselves in 10 minutes. No, we're not doing that. Okay, you can turn this on back into the game when you get into the position where you want to sort out and start actually getting attacked. So I would say starting out, you would turn this off, and then this is going to go on once you reach later into the game, once you're like level 50 or so, and you've decided, okay, this is going to be my main raid base. When a raid is coming, this is where I'm gonna hang out. Until now, we're turning that off. Predators, though, actually are quite cool. I like predators. They're hard. They are likely to kill you. In fact, they did kill me and my lad. We were fighting one, and it was a bit too hard for us, and I think that's good. It's exciting. I can beat them occasionally, and that's something that we should probably want to have in the game, is that there's something that's a bit dangerous, might, cause a bit of a problem unless we are ready to face it properly. I like to have predators on. They also drop important items, and in fact, you need those items to expand your inventory slots. So 1 are essential, 2 are exciting. So keep predators on, they're good. Death penalty. I don't like drop all items. It must be the worst thing in the game when you drop all of your equipment. I do like drop items except equipment, though. No drops is too stupid. Drop all items is too stupid. Drop all items and pals is too ridiculous. Drop all items on death, I think, is good. I'm sure some people would make an argument for ultimate convenience, but I like drop items because, from almost maybe even a balanced perspective, we've decided that we can carry as much stuff as we want. But if I go for so long that I'm upset that I've lost all of my items, that's my fault that I didn't go back and drop all of my stuff off. And I quite like that as a bit of a balancing mechanic between itself, that I can carry as much as I want, but I could die and lose it all. So I think that is the way forward. Unless you're on a dedicated server, maximum number of guild members is irrelevant because we can only have 4 players on at one time. Yes, you can mix the players that are on, but this really isn't going to make very much difference to anybody's gameplay. Maximum number of bases, though, is going right to 10 for me. You're going to want 5 just to get everything done, because ultimately you're going to need / want a breeding base specifically. You're going to want a base that can get you oil, because we can't build that into our bases yet. And the same goes for, I can't remember what they're called now. I think it's chromite. So there's 2 endgame materials that we can't naturally farm within the base. We're going to need bases to go and farm those, and we're going to need at least 1 or 2 bases for that. So that's 2 bases, maybe 3. You're going to want a general production one, so one where you can take all your materials from all your other bases, just go get things built nice and easy. It's going to want to be fairly self-sufficient. You might even have stone, wood, and all of the other stuff in there, depending on what you do with the next setting when we look at it in a second. That's on 3 bases. We've already spoken, we need to have, by the end of the game, a raid base. That's 4 already. And then as well as that, we need at least 1 mining base, because you're going to want a base where, you throw up a few ingot nodes, you throw up some stone, some wood, anything else that you want, and then because we've got low item weight, we just go to the base, go shopping, get the materials that you need, take that to where you want it, and craft it. You can automate most of the ability to have those get processed as well within the base. Ultimately, 5 bases is a minimum, and that's if you don't want any comfort. So having a 6th means even if you're playing solo, you can have like a fast travel one, or something you can do something a bit different with, or maybe you've seen like a nice area that you just want to have a cool base in. So that's 6. I've then got 2 kids and a wife, plus a friend that wants to play with us. So I'm at 10. We can't go any lower than 10. I'm glad it's 10 already. That is basically how that's going to be. Now, the amount of pals per base. So far, we haven't had an issue with this, and we haven't actually reached 10 bases since we started replaying recently. So I think that 20 is enough to make a fairly self-sufficient base. You should be able to get a couple of farmers in there making food. You should be able to get something in there that can make medicine. And you should be able to get something in there that is then doing something else. So you're going to have 1 medicine. You're probably going to have 2 on watering, 2 on planting and farming. That's going to give you 5. The other 15 are going to be producing something for you. When it comes to the mining nodes, it's 3 each. That means you could have 1 wood, 1 stone, and then let's say you wanted a load of ingots. You then have 3 ore mines set up, and that's going to allow you to burst out a hell of a load of resources and mean that everything's all hunky-dory. Going above that is basically comfort. I think 30 is probably really nice, and 40 means you can build really nice, impressive bases with all sorts of construction lines and stuff in them. There is probably some kind of trade-off here, but so far we've not had any issues in terms of performance. I am running my world on a 5800 X3D, so I don't know how much more powerful than a Series X that is, but I have heard that even the Xbox One X can run Palworld fairly decently, so if that's the case, we can probably have this maxed out and not even have to worry about it. We, so far, have not needed any maximum number of structures per base. This really isn't likely to affect performance all that much. If anything, this will affect load times because it's just accessing previous saves. So far, no limits. If we need to put one in, we'll put one in, but this will be fine. This is effective just how many items you can place down a base. I mean, when I think about 500, that's probably really tight. You're going to want at least 5,000 so that you can put all of your pieces down. I would just leave it on no limit so you've got all the freedom. Of course, I can't change it here because I'm not creating a new world. Let's get a fresh set of settings here. Moving on to random pal mode then. This actually seems pretty good. Haven't tried it yet. It seems actually kind of wild. I don't know how much it randomizes, because if it randomizes boss and stuff, I'm well up for trying these out. But basically, this is going to give you random pals in random areas, but I really like the idea of just randomized by region, so each region basically gets a new set of pals in it. I don't know if there's a way that keeps certain types of pals in certain areas, but this just seems really cool and a good way to make it nice and fresh when you start playing again. So when it comes to random pal mode, this is going to change where all of the natural pals are going to spawn. I have no idea whether that affects the ones that you need the colorful pal spheres for. This does sound really wild and I really love the idea of it. We can randomize the levels as well, but I probably wouldn't do that. I'd probably keep the regions similarly level, and then you can just randomize by region. Fast travel, self-explanatory. When you get to a fast travel point, of course, you want to be able to fast travel to it. In fact, this turns off an entire feature of the game, because when you get to the towers, you'd obviously get the technology points, but then it does nothing else. It just seems rather crazy. I guess maybe if you're doing like some kind of PvP thing, you might turn that off, but ultimately I don't see any reason that you would have that off. Hardcore mode, self-explanatory. Do you want players to permanently die or pals to permanently die? I feel like pals to permanently die would be absolutely infuriating. The amount of time it takes to get a pal perfected is obscene, and wasting all of that time just seems stupid to me. I would leave these on. This basically allows you to take pals in and out of your worlds, and apparently even allows you to trade them with players if you know where to look, but I haven't really got a Palworld community and I haven't really looked into anything like that. This is just a matter of, if I wanted to go into an old world, I can bring my old pals into my new world, which is kind of useful, but whilst you're just starting out, it's a little bit of cheating, so we haven't really done that. Maybe when I get to the back end of the game, I might bring some of my older creations over, but for now, we're not really utilizing that much anyway. And that is it for what I think the best world settings are for Palworld. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Let me know what you guys think, what you prefer to have on in your worlds, and I'll catch you all in the next one.